Hi, I'm Tyler Suiters and you're watching Clean Skies News. Today we're taking a behind-the-scenes look at the climate legislation now underway in the Senate. This is a bill that apparently may still be under construction because recently Majority Leader Harry Reid announced he is pushing back his timetable for having this bill arrive in the Senate for consideration. I talked to MWR Strategies' Mike McKenna. He has a number of clients who would be directly affected by climate change legislation, and with that in mind, he was involved in the negotiating process on the House bill and also now in the Senate bill. He and I discussed what lies ahead for what should be a bill from Barbara Boxer on climate change, and we started by talking about one of his predictions, that this most recent delay from Senator Reid means that a conference play for this legislation is more likely down the road. And you said that involves the energy bill from Bingaman and Murkowski as well as Boxer's climate bill.
Yeah, I think probably what's the most, what became more likely when the schedule got attenuated is that Senator Reid will pick off the more attractive and consensus-oriented pieces of the energy legislation that comes out of Senate Energy, you know, the RES, some of the transmission, energy efficiencies, and runs that through the Senate, and that they try to add the climate title in conference. I'm not saying that that's likely. I'm saying it became more likely when the schedule became attenuated.
In your mind, Mike, and from the negotiating process and what you've seen on the inside, why is the Senate so much different than the House? Is it the climate? Is it the numbers? Or is it really the geographical differences that we've been citing for months now?
Yeah, you know, it's not terribly well understood, and I don't think it's taught in a lot of political science classes, but you know, the Senate is a purely regional body, you know, just by the way it's set up. And on an issue like this, where there are sometimes really stark and dramatic regional differences, there's a lot of trouble getting things through the Senate, and energy is especially prone to that sort of thing, and we're seeing it play out here.
Last week I heard Henry Waxman talk about those geographical differences and the fact that he addressed those in the Waxman-Markey ACES bill. In your opinion, do you agree that they are well enough addressed to make progress in the Senate?
Well, I think, you know, I think what Henry Waxman tried to do was spread out the cost of a program over the first 20 years or so, you know, through transition allowances, free allowances, if you will. But the underlying reality of it is that, you know, coal is a loser in this, and anybody from a state that makes or uses coal, you know, digs it out of the ground or uses coal is fully aware of that.
That's even with the $10 billion that Waxman-Markey puts out for CCS research?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the Waxman-Markey effort did its level best that it could, but I'm not sure it's going to be sufficient for, like I said, coal producing and using regions.
One of the things you mentioned to me, Mike, was the fact that Rick Boucher has been talking to senators, not just recently, but for months now. Here's a big-time coal guy, and he brought everybody on board in the House. What's going on with his role with senators right now?
Well, you know, he's been talking to the senators, and truthfully, he gave Chairman Waxman a lot of cover with some of the coal votes in the House. I'm not quite sure senators outside of the Commonwealth of Virginia are going to be as impressed with, you know, Rick Boucher's approval as the folks inside of Virginia were. So I think it's, again, probably one of those things that's necessary but may not be sufficient in the long run.
Pushing forward now, are we going to see a breakout of Bingaman and Murkowski versus Boxer? Conference play or not? The wisdom so far is that Reid brings both of these together and throws them all at once. Is there possible passage for half of this and not the other half?
Yeah, I think, you know, what the likely path is that Reid probably does something very much like that. He sort of melds them together, and then as it becomes obvious that, you know, some parts of them are more popular than others, the less popular parts strip away. And not even popular, but the complexity and transmission, I'm thinking in particular here. You know, transmission had 67 amendments, I think, filed in committee on it. I think they got to 5 or so over a 2-week markup and finally just gave up on it. You know, that suggests to me there's a lot of appetite to rework that title. So I think transmission is going to be tough to do on the floor. I think climate's going to be very tough to do on the floor. And I think, you know, over time, the least common denominator sort of gets to be the answer in the Senate.
Back in June, Mike, when House negotiations were very tenuous, especially with the Agriculture Committee, you had said that this ends with Pelosi, Peterson, and Waxman holding hands together at a press conference. You were spot on. You got that just right. How does the Senate version end?
I don't know. I think the Senate version ends with a sequence of cloture votes on the climate title that do not succeed, and that ultimately Reid and Boxer set it aside. Unlike in the House, where sort of I always knew that Colin Peterson was going to fold at the end of the day. It's not at all clear to me that folks like Sherrod Brown and Claire McCaskill are going to be gettable in the end. I think that is a very open question still.
As for what all these delays due to the timetable for Barbara Boxer's legislation, the Environment Committee chairman says she will introduce her bill within her committee sometime after the summer recess to Labor Day holiday that the Senate will take. Then Majority Leader Reid says his plan is to have that bill on the floor of the Senate right around September 28th. I'm Tyler Souters, and you're watching Clean Skies News.